So, here we go. Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Transfers Live and we're here with Jay. Marty, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. It feels weird. It's Transfers Live. We're sat down and it's not Wednesday night.
Well, it's because there has been some transfers popping off already.
Popping off,
It's been popping off. Man United have made a bid for the PSG midfielder, Manuel Ugarte.
Yes.
Ugarte.
Yeah.
It has reportedly been turned down, but we're going to get into the details of this story. Who is he? What's he all about? Why United bidding for him? What kind of player is he? And what can we glean from this as to what Manchester United's transfer policy is going to be? What kind of player are we going for?
Yeah.
Be honest, Jay. How much do you know about Manuel Ugarte?
Well, I've been a staunch admirer of him.
Yeah.
And ardent fan of his work for the past 37 minutes.
37 minutes.
Yeah,
I've been big into him.
I have been well into him since then. Listen, I'm not going to pretend I knew a lot about him. I didn't. Obviously, since that news has broke, I've been looking into him, watching as many video clips as I can. Looking at the stats, looking at all that jazz. Didn't know a lot about him, and so I'm not going to pretend I watch a lot of Paris Saint-Germain since he's arrived. I haven't, but you can sort of down on what type of a player he is.
Yeah.
The question is he good enough for Manchester United? We know he's a sort of ball-winning midfielder, loves to tackle, likes to get a foot in. You think that could work in our midfield? We need someone like that, especially with the decline of Casemiro, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But is he good enough? Because there's a sort of, from a lot of the reports I've been reading and sort of chatting to people and just sort of briefly who have watched more of him, there's a little bit of a question mark there as to whether he's at that level.
Well, it's interesting because 12 months ago, PSG signed him, I think from Sporting Lisbon.
Yeah.
And he was considered one of the better up-and-coming central midfielders in the world. Like, he was 21 years old, maybe just turned 22 years old when PSG signed him. He's like I said, ball-winning, like you said, ball-winning central midfielder, sort of high energy, good work rate. He's not a creative player. He is a defensive midfielder.
Yeah.
He's good on the ball, but he's not a ball player. He gets it and he gives it.
Yeah.
But he's crucially rates very, very well in terms of winning the ball back. The weird thing is, PSG signed him for 60 million euros 12 months ago.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for a 22-year-old coming out of Portugal. Like, that is a hell of a lot of money. And he was very, very highly regarded. He's since gone there and sort of had a bad season, but he's made, I think, 35 appearances for them this season, or maybe, I think it's
37 in all competitions.
37, apologies, in all competitions for them. He's made, and it's not just all substitution appearances. I think he averages about 67 minutes per appearance. So yes, he comes off and he's been a rotation piece, but he's not someone that only plays the last 5 minutes of games. You know, he's had plenty of minutes. And yet he's not fully favoured. He's not someone that is kind of a first name on the team sheet for PSG. And I think it's almost like we're doing to other people, what we're looking to do to PSG, what other people do to us, which is get a player a year after a move that hasn't maybe worked out the way you'd like it to, for a discounted fee or perhaps on a loan. You know how PSG got Di Maria from us? He was amazing for PSG.
Yeah.
He went on to be one of their better players in a team with absolute world stars in it. He would often be the standout because he was a great player. It just didn't work out at United, and maybe that's part of the transfer methodology this summer. Instead of just going for people who are on the rise all the time, Branthwaite, hype, you get the player that 12 months ago, he was the Jared Branthwaite in a different position. He was the young, promising midfielder coming out of Portugal, but now he's dipped a little bit. So maybe you get him, he's still the same player he was 12 months ago, but you get him for less money, or you can get him on a loan where, 12 months ago, like I said, PSG spent 60 million euros on this kid. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that, listen, if you've just bought someone, he's not been there that long, and he's linked with a move away, then the obvious sort of logic is it hasn't worked out. There's a reason why you're trying to sell him, especially at the age he's only a young lad. It's not like he's you bought him short term as a short term option because he's getting on a bit. He's a young lad. Now they've obviously also got another option there because they've got the Brazilian kid Gabriel Moscado. They bought from Corinthians, loaned him back to Corinthians, and I think he goes back to Paris now, basically.
Yeah.
So they'll be looking at him as being an option for them. And I think some of the smart money might be on, well, he's going to come into that side, and then the lad Manuel Ugarte is going to get moved on because, as you said, maybe he's not quite lived up to expectations. Maybe he's not quite the player that they were hoping for. And this is where Manchester United can come in now. I have to stress here with this sort of United have had a bid rejected.
Yeah.
Some people are saying we've had a bid rejected. I think TalkSport have ran with it, or a couple of other sites. The majority of the mainstream media and the ones you trust the most seem to sort of indicate that we're interested in him, that we're looking at him.
Okay.
So we have to sort of scratch beneath the surface and dig a little deeper before we can get concrete proof. Before we've got an Ornstein saying a bid has been rejected, or a Romano, whatever. I've not seen that yet, and if it has happened, then by all means get involved in the chat and the comments, let me know. But it seems like there's some outlets are going with there's a bid there, it's a bid and it's been rejected. Others are saying United are preparing a bid. Others are saying United are interested in him. There's definitely something there because everyone seems to be in agreement, from Sky Sports to the papers, the Daily Mail, the Mirror, whoever, that United are looking at this player, that want this player. The question is, how far along the line has that interest gone? Has it gone to a bid of being rejected, or are we still at the stage of we're looking at him? I'm just sort of trying to get something a little bit more concrete.
I think L'Équipe in France have said there was a bid.
The bid.
And I think Ben Jacobs has said there was a bid as well.
Ben Jacobs, who we've had on the channel a lot of the time. So it's not like you can dismiss that. I like Ben, he's a good lad, and he does his own work. So there's obviously something there.
Yeah.
It's just not everyone is running with that story as yet. Some of them are playing it a little bit safer and going, look, there's interest there. But you can't deny there's something going on because everyone is saying that. It's just how far down the line it is. And we'll have to wait and see. Aaron Webb in the Super Chat says, Branthwaite played for Van Nistelrooy at PSV. Ruud Van Nistelrooy joining the coaching staff. That's another story, which we can get into in a minute.
Yeah.
Also, let me know what you think of these links with Manuel Ugarte. What do you reckon? Is he the answer to our problems? Do you think he can slot in? Have you watched much of him? Jordan Clark says, Edison for me from Atlanta. Guiano says we are stuck financially, I think. Daniel Farr says I'd prefer him to Edison at Atlanta. He's good defensively. Other people just sort of debating here as to who they'd like to see, whether they'd like to see him come in. I mean, a lot of people talk about different players they like. I mean, it's good to see that United have got a defensive midfielder or a midfielder on their radar, because we need a defensive midfielder, don't we? We need someone to come in and slot in that role. Part of the issue you've got is Casemiro, his decline.
Yeah.
Now, I've been looking at sort of the scouting reports because, like I say, I know you love to look at the scouting reports. I don't know a lot about this kid. And in terms of ball winning, he's right up there. He's in the top 1% in Ligue 1 for tackles, the top 3% for interceptions. I mean, he is that guy.
Yeah.
And all the footage I've watched of him, the sort of the best bits, if you will, or what he seems good at, is making the tackles. He reminds me of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, some of the tackles he does. Yeah. And I'm not saying that to take the mick out of the kid, because I love Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and anyone watches this channel knows that. But tackling, he has that sort of style, doesn't he? Yeah. Where he can win the ball cleanly despite going to ground, which is quite a rare. And you see that in a guy, he's very, very good at that. Now, compared to Casemiro, he's better, or his stats are better. I know it's got a little bit slightly apples and oranges because you're looking at different leagues, but you can get the impression of what the player is. Whereas with Casemiro, his tackles are still very high. His interceptions has dropped right down as he sort of
to me, I think
age catches up with him.
Is a big one, because an interception means you're in the right position.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to be in the right position to make a tackle as well. But if you just stand near the opposition player, or if you're a defensive player, you're going to make tackles.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to make interceptions as well to a certain extent, but interceptions is a judge of your positional ability, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas tackles is more of a kind of, you and another player going together at the same time. If you push them out the way, you've won a tackle. If they, what I mean? I think interceptions I like because it shows that you're reading the game well, and that's something that Casemiro was great at. At Real Madrid, his interceptions was sky high a few years ago when we first signed him, and I was looking at those same numbers. His interceptions were through the roof, and his reading of the game. But we've all seen Casemiro last season. He's lost that. That initial, I'm going to get there, or I'm going to cut you off, or when you make that pass, I'm going to sneak in and win it. He's completely lost that.
Yeah.
And I think as well, he's played some of these games, and some of the stats for Casemiro that you're looking at there were from when he was at centre back. Yeah. So you're going to get a couple more tackles, and the opportunity to tackle more in that position, because especially with United, the amount of shots and pressure we concede.
There's also that thing of like, I'm not hating on Casemiro because I feel like I'm very critical of him recently, but I just call it as I see it. This isn't MUTV. Like, you look at the Arsenal game, for example, him not pushing out a defence quick enough. There's not a stat for that.
No.
You're not going to see that in a stat and go, oh, in the Arsenal game, he more or less cost us a game because he just was a bit lazy. That isn't going to show up on a scouting report where you're just looking at stats. So a little bit of it is what you've seen him do and what you've seen him being capable of. And I think that the vast majority of United fans I speak to, by all means, get involved in the comments in the chat, seems to agree that Casemiro is done.
Yeah,
I think I rarely see a United fan, whether it's online or chat to them or in a group chat or face to face or whatever at the match, who thinks that Casemiro can still do a job next season for Manchester United. And the worrying thing is, he's seems to be getting worse over the last since he arrived.
Yeah.
I think his first season was decent, but his second season he seems to just decline a little bit. And is he going to get better next season, or are we going to see the continuation of that decline?
Yeah.
That's the big worry, because he's 32 years old. He's not getting any younger. Plus, his physique doesn't lend itself to someone who you'd expect. I'm not saying it can't happen. You'd expect to be playing into his mid-30s. So I don't know. I just feel that Casemiro, we need to sort of start looking at a replacement. There's talk of him going to Saudi Arabia. That seems to be going a little bit back and forth, varying reports. 1 minute it's happening, 1 minute it isn't. There definitely seems to be a little bit of fire to that smoke. But if we can get Casemiro gone to Saudi Arabia and bring in someone else, whether that's Ugarte or anyone else, that for me would be a good bit of business for Manchester United.
Stats can be very deceiving. Like you said, there's plenty of things that there is no stat for. And, not every pass completed is equal. No. You look at the pass completed that Paul Scholes would do. 65-yard ball out to the winger. Nani puts it in. Rooney scored. That is a completed pass. It's not an assist. It's not a chance created.
No.
But it's a pass that has potentially won us the game that no one else on that pitch could do. So you have to take stats with a pinch of salt to a certain degree, and you have to look at more than just stats. People love stats, and I like stats, but they aren't the only thing that matter. They are one part of the picture. And I haven't watched a whole lot of Ugarte this season. I've read reports and interviews and details from people who have seen more of him, and what people were saying about him when he was in Portugal in particular was very, very positive indeed. But you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think he had a little bit of on-the-pitch discipline issues when he was in Portugal. A lot of yellow cards, which, to be fair, I don't mind. If you're that sort of player, you win him tackles, you're getting stuck in, you're going to get a few yellow cards. You just don't want it to be, getting sent off every other week like Casemiro did in his first season. But more so than the player in particular, I like what this tells us about United's transfer policy. Because I think this summer, obviously the biggest story will be who we sign, who comes in. But I think right behind that in terms of significance and importance for United long term is how we go about our business. This isn't just a summer of analysing players. This is a summer of analysing Ineos and the new ownership and how we do things. And I think that this shows that we're looking at a slightly different sort of transfer method. Like I mentioned before, this idea of maybe going for a player who certainly isn't past it in terms of age. He's 23 years old, but he's had a deal that maybe didn't quite go to plan. This PSG deal, whilst he's played plenty of minutes this season, he's hardly been the star that a £60 million 22-year-old might suggest. And it's sort of capitalising on deals that people have, either you get them before they've made their big move, or maybe the big move hasn't quite worked out the way they would have liked, and you can sweep them up for a discounted fee. I don't mind that as a plan, especially when United are struggling for money. But you look across the board, it's, we talked about it on the Paddock podcast yesterday, it's youngsters. There's no 28-year-olds, there's no 30-year-olds, there's certainly no 35, 36, 37-year-olds, Zlatans, Ronaldos, Cavani's.
Yeah.
Everyone United is linked with so far has been under the age of 25, let alone the age of 35.
Yeah.
It's been a technique of refreshing the squad, not just in terms of personnel, but in terms of people who are on the way up in their career. I talk about this all the time, but it's so important to have someone who's got something to prove, because United have got something to prove. I think that the players have to match the club.
Yeah.
You can't have a load of players who are, strolling in thinking that they know what they're doing, thinking they're going to win the league at a club completely incapable of winning the league. Yeah. You need players who are capable of growing to that, but at the minute are here to put every single bit of effort in that they can to prove to Ten Hag, to Ineos, to us as fans that they deserve to be there. And when they do that, that's how I can see with the odd Bruno and Rashford and Lisandro Martinez in there as well. That's how United can start to achieve things longer term. We can't just have this cycle of old players coming in thinking they're going to win one last trophy at United when, we're not really ready for that. We're not ready to win a Champions League or a Premier League yet.
No, you're right, and we need to see a little bit more of that, like you're speaking about there, that sort of a holistic approach to scouting. Why is he available? Why can we get him? Yeah. What's his personality? Is he going to work at Manchester United? Because we've had so many players, you mentioned Angel Di Maria earlier, who on paper looked tailor-made for Manchester United. Angel Di Maria was at Real Madrid. I think he was the player of the match in the Champions League final. The type of player you'd want to see at Old Trafford, exciting, carries the ball, can create goals, score goals, all the rest of it. You think, there's no reason why he shouldn't fit in. Did he want to come to Manchester United? Was he ready to move to Manchester? Did Louis van Gaal have a plan for him? No, is the answer to all those questions. So other than the first 2 months where I think he did okay, or did well to be honest, but better than okay, after that it was a complete disaster, and you had him playing out of position for a manager who didn't really want him or didn't know what to do with him at a club he didn't want to be at. You're never going to have success with that. And then you can look at other clubs and other teams who have had success, and the one I always go back to, and forgive me because I repeat myself and I don't like talking about him, but it's true, is Mo Salah at Liverpool. You've got a manager who didn't want him, what Julian Brand, but they went, look, he fits your system. He will be a success. We have scouted him. He's ready to come back to the Premier League. He's not the guy you saw at Chelsea. He's improved, and he absolutely smashes it. You mentioned Bruno. That's the one we got right, and it feels like that was almost like an accident because we had so many that went wrong that amongst all that nonsense was one that was actually, for me, one of the best bargains in, I don't care how much he cost, in Premier League history, because he's just been mint. We'll get in some of the comments and I'll come back to you. Reece says, Manuel Ugarte, get a done deal. Where's the puns? Okay, we'll get back to the puns on a Wednesday night show. Joe C has been a member of the Academy for 42 months, which is fantastic, by the way. Says, how much would it take to get Hulmand, I should say, from Sporting? Steve did a video on him, and he's looked good during the Euros. If it's the same as Ugarte, get Hulmand. Now, this is the kid in it who scored that banger
against England.
I'm not going to pretend I've watched loads of him, and also I'm loath to go, he scored a really good goal in the Euros, go and get him, because I'm old enough, as I said on the news this morning, to remember Karol Pawłowski. But from what I've seen, he looks a good player. I mean, I like to think United are looking at all these different options. I like to think if Ugarte's not the one, or we can't get him, or he don't want to come, or whatever, that we've got other similar-ish type of players who can fit in that role and who can do a job. Because I think as well, you've got to be looking at someone, for me, who can grab hold of that ball, because Kobbie Mainoo is going to start for Manchester United next season. Now, he's a very good player. I think he's more of an 8 than a 6. He can play in that double pivot, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's someone who, whilst he can get stuck in, is that guy who goes and runs around winning tackles everywhere. You need someone who's going to do that alongside him, and then maybe give him the ball or work with him. Same with like Bruno, obviously a bit further up the pitch. So I'd like to see a real ball winner. That's what I want to see. Because sometimes you can have a player, you mentioned about reading the game, and who can sort of cut out passes and cut out balls before they come through. Michael Carrick's the obvious answer to that. But sometimes you need a bit more like a, like an Owen Hargreaves was for that one season, where the reason him and Carrick worked so well together was because Owen Hargreaves was that tackler that perhaps Carrick wasn't, who just read the game and pick up the interceptions and what have you.
Got a little bit of a question for you, and to people at home as well. Do you know, like, we're talking at the minute about all these players that United can sign, and we're going down a different path.
Yep. Like,
obviously, we know from watching football that if you've got a team full of world stars, you might not win everything. Obviously, Real Madrid didn't win everything, but they certainly won stuff. Yeah. Even during that Galacticos era, which was slightly underwhelming, they still won the league. They still won a Champions League or two. It does work. That one way to win things is have a team full of world stars. United now seem to be going down this pathway of youngsters, like we said before, coming in to prove themselves, players on the way up rather than on the way down.
Yeah.
Like, how many players do you think there are in the world that United could buy that could win us the league in 3 or 4 years? Like, we say this thing all the time of like, if we can't get Branthwaite for less than 50 million, we should go elsewhere. Yeah. Okay. And then if you apply that logic to all of United's transfers, and you get in the second and third and fourth option, do you think there's like 500 players in the world that United could feasibly sign who with the right system, the right coach, could win us the league? Or do you think that the number of players who are actually good enough, because just because they are young doesn't mean they're good enough?
No.
How many players do you think there actually are that we could sign and genuinely start challenging with? Do you know what I mean? Like, look at like Arsenal, for instance. Like, is there 10 Odegaards in the world, or is there 2? Like, is there 10 Sakas in the world, or is there 2? Do United have? Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying here? Is there just a limitless number of players that if you bring them in, we can still win stuff? Or that whole idea of like, if you're charging us too much, we'll go somewhere else. At some point, do you get to a player where they're just not good enough?
Yeah.
Does that worry you at all?
It does a little bit. Jay's Shiny Dome, by the way, I've just seen you said I miss your super chat. I'll get to that in a minute, my brother.
Do you know what I'm asking there?
Yeah.
A little bit convoluted way of saying it, but like, are we going to run out of players who are good enough? There's
not an infinite number. Sorry, not finite. There's not an infinite number of players who can win you a Premier League title.
Yeah.
That are available. Like, there's a limit, because obviously you have to be a super footballer to win a Premier League. Like, there's exceptions. Let's not get silly, but you're not just going to go, okay, he's a good midfielder, get him in, we'll win a title. Declan Rice is a good midfielder. He's a very good midfielder. There's a chance he won't win a Premier League title. He might do. And he's got a very good chance of winning one, because Arsenal finished second they finished second the year before, and he finished second again. So it looks like they're sort of getting towards that, but he might not. Is he a bad midfielder? No. Thomas Partey's probably not going to win one. I know he's got his other issues, but is he a bad midfielder? I think he'll probably move on before they do, even if Arsenal do win a title. So it's not just about being a good player. You've got to have a good team around you. You've got to have the sum of your parts, because Tom Cleverley won a Premier League title. Now, if we bought a Tom Cleverley type player now, would we win a title with him? No, because we haven't got the team that Tom Cleverley had around him, where we had a magnificent squad. So Tom Cleverley was, no disrespect to the kid, had world-class defenders behind him and world-class attackers in front of him.
But so like, the inverse of that question, I suppose, is like, let's talk about those world-class defenders. If you put Nemanja Vidic in Sheffield United's team, how much better would he make them? Or is it all about the whole, rather than just the individual pieces? Obviously, they have to be very good. But like, if you put a shit player in City's, not a shit player, an average Premier League player in City's team, they'll still probably win the league. But if you put De Bruyne in at Burnley, they're probably still going to get relegated. Like, I wonder how many options there actually are for United, or whether the system is so important that it doesn't really matter almost.
I think Fergie might have said something along these lines. Like, if you've got, say, even just right, 3 or 4 maybe world-class players, and you've got 7 or 8 very good players around them, you can win a title. I think you can. And I think, like, going back to sort of, even Leicester's a great example. Everyone talks about Leicester. I know it's an outlier, but Leicester in N'Golo Kante had a world-class midfielder. Riyad Mahrez, when he was there, was world-class. Jamie Vardy's numbers are world-class numbers. If you're scoring every single time you play football in the Premier League, which he did for about 3 months, that's world-class. Yeah. You might argue he's not a world-class footballer.
He was that season.
That season he was.
Undoubtedly.
Because he was scoring literally, he broke Ruud van Nistelrooy's record. And I'll tell you something, Ruud van Nistelrooy was a definition of world-class. So if you've got 3 or 4 world-class players, and you've just got good players around him, you might get away with it. Now, Leicester's a bit of an outlier, because it's like the rest of the Premier League had a bit of a season off. You didn't have City at their best. You didn't have an Arsenal at their very best, or Liverpool at their very best. That's a little bit different. So maybe Liverpool's a better example, because you look at that Liverpool team. Mo Salah's world class, Virgil van Dijk's world class. I'd say Alisson Becker's world class.
Yeah.
Then I'm looking at some of the other players.
Mane's on the cusp.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Firmino,
Robertson that season on the cusp.
Yeah, on the cusp. Trent Alexander-Arnold on the cusp maybe. Then you've got others, and I go, maybe not.
Yeah.
But they're good players, even if they're not world-class players. So I think if you've got a core of 3 or 4 world-class players, and you add very good players to that team, you can win a title. Now, the issue you've got at Manchester United right now is, have we got those 3 or 4 world-class players?
Yeah.
Because have we got to go out and get some of them?
But then, just to go back to Salah for a minute, he was, 24 when he came back from Roma? Regardless, he was in his mid-20s, early to mid-20s. So he went from being like an 18, 16 goal a season guy to the season he joined Liverpool. I think he scored 41 goals, 42 goals.
Yeah.
Would he have been that same player at Roma, do you think? Was he going to explode that next season regardless? Or do you think part of what made him world class, the same way hopefully it would happen to Branthwaite and Ugarte and the other players that United are linked with, is part of what made Mo Salah world class the system he was in.
Yeah.
Would he have gone on to be a 44 goal a season player for Roma and then maybe be sold for 100 million? Or do you think he never would have got there were it not for the move to Liverpool? Like, as in, what I'm saying is, could Jared Branthwaite stay at Everton and be a 7 out of 10 defender, but if we sign him and put in him a good system, become a 9, 10 out of 10 central defender?
Potentially,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think you go back to Salah is a good example, because in 2015-2016 he scored 14 goals in the league.
Yeah.
The following season, although he played 3 fewer games, he scored 15.
Yeah.
So you might look at that and go,
stagnating.
He's not quite, he's doing a little bit better, but he's not. But Liverpool knew he'd fit in that system, and I think, to be honest with you, they'd probably get a bit more credit deserved. I don't think anyone could have predicted what he'd do, which has become one of the best Premier League players ever, arguably. So, I mean, he scored 32 Premier League goals in his first season. That's stupid. Yeah. Like, he's a bit different. But I think some players that you say, look at him potentially, like Branthwaite, very, very good defender. If you get him in the United team, he might become that guy playing alongside Lisandro Martinez, I presume is the plan. That maybe if he stays fit and he sort of achieves the potential that he's got, he could do. But it's such a difficult thing to predict, because, I mean, if you were to ask me back in the day, I would have said that someone like Ananda Januzaj or Kiko Makeda even, or took that cleverly in Welbeck, there was signs that they were going to be sort of United regulars. Everyone thought they were going to be United regulars for many years to come. Yet it didn't happen for them for varying reasons. Whereas obviously you look at someone like a Wes Brown or a Nicky Butt or a Scholes or whatever, were just immense. And again, Ravel Morrison's probably the most naturally gifted player I've ever seen. Played twice for United? I know he's had other issues. So it is very difficult when you're just looking at potential. And I think you have to look at that sort of balance. And I think what I like about this Ugarte, going back to the Ugarte rumours, what I like is this idea that just because someone's had a move that hasn't quite worked out doesn't mean they're a bad player.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different reasons moves don't quite work out the way you want to. And he's not had a shocker at PSG, let's not forget. It's not like they've had a completely horrendous season. What, they get to the Champions League semis and they've won the league?
Won the league, yeah.
That's a pretty good season for them. He's not had an absolute stinker, but there might be mitigating circumstances where you say, okay, he's not quite the player for them they wanted, or he's expected to be. I don't know, I've not looked into him that extensively, but sometimes certain players don't quite work out the way you want him. Kevin De Bruyne at Chelsea is a prime example. Jose basically dragged him in the office, said, your numbers are terrible, what's going on? And he's like, well, you're barely playing me, and he said, well, get out. And he was like, before you knew it, he was off to Germany. Yeah. You could have looked at that and gone, well, we've had him in the Premier League, it didn't work out, he ain't that guy. But obviously he is. Yeah. So there's always mitigating circumstances that you might need to look at, and that's maybe where United needs to box clever, because it's like the whole Moneyball thing. If you haven't got the most money to spend, which we haven't, and you can't just say we're United, come and play for us rather than someone else because it's United, because players go, well, are you in the Champions League? Well, what? No. Well, why would
not at the minute.
Yeah.
No.
Well, would you win titles every year?
Like I said, not at the minute.
Not at the minute. When's the last time you won a title?
We're taking a bit of time
12 years ago. What? Or 11 years ago, sorry. It's not that attractive, but if you can look below the surface and go, right, here's a player we can get for 30, 40, 50 million who might not have been, smashing it last season at his club, but there's a player there that we can get. It's worth looking at. We'll go into some chats and I'll come back to you. Cool. Jay Shiny Dome, apologies you've had to wait for your super chat to be read out. Safe to say that a guy, get him signed, plus Rabiot seems to be one that always pops up. I think he might be done now. Akash K says, why aren't we trying for Weifer in that number 6 role? Is this a kid from Holland in it? You'd think so, wouldn't you? Because the amount of times we get linked to Dutch players at Feyenoord, obviously away with the Euros as well. I mean, there's loads of different players, different suggestions. Number 6s, you could say, who United could look at. Marcus says, what is Rice good at? What are his standout attributes? He's just average, mate. That's probably me going on about Declan Rice earlier.
That's a bit unfair.
Yeah, I don't think Declan Rice is average.
No.
I don't. Is this the same person that's saying? Yeah, I think it is the same person saying that he's just average and that Bruno Guimaraes is better. Akash Cases and Phil Jones. Phil Jones at one point, everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing. He was compared to John Terry. Dimiz Mob says we haven't had a solid system since Sir Alex Ferguson. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Brian Casey says Lukaku at every club hasn't worked yet. He's had the most money spent on him. Ha 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 ha.
But you say that, but he was fantastic for Everton. West Brom fans still love him. He either broke or almost broke the Serie A goal scoring record at Inter and won them the league. He's not been a failure ever. He's been the first season at United. He was excellent. He's the problem with him is he's capable of missing shitloads of chances in big games, but he's Belgium's all-time top scorer. I think he's got the record in Serie A for most goals in a season, and if he hasn't, he's very close to it. He's won the league there. He was excellent for United in the first season. Like I said, he was amazing for Everton, very good for West Brom. Like, he hasn't been bad everywhere.
The trouble with Lukaku is, just going on this one, and this is why sometimes you need to look at the player, the system. Is he going to work? What is he about? Lukaku, I think he had the same amount of goals in his season at United as he had at Everton the previous season, which isn't terrible. And if you look at Lukaku on paper, 42 goals, and I'm not even reading this, I know it off by heart, 42 goals in 96 games. That's a good return. If Marcus Rashford had those numbers, or if Alejandro Garnacho or Rasmus Højlund, we'd all be buzzing. 42 goals in 96 games. But when you scratch beneath the surface, I think he had 1 goal against the top 6 in all his time at Manchester United. Yeah. You look at some of those games as well, the game against Manchester City, which I know it was almost like a title decider, considering we finished second, they finished first at Old Trafford, and he set up both City goals.
Yeah, and he's got a history of missing big chances in big games as well. Look at Belgium in the knockouts. Look at Inter in the Champions League.
Oh, that header against City.
He's got such a. It's almost because it affects him because the way he speaks in interviews. He's someone that talks a lot about his legacy and people doubting me and all that. I think he's someone that struggles with his confidence, and you can tell it does because when it comes to the big games and the big moments, more often than not, it doesn't go his way.
Me and my mate
it makes me feel a bit sad for him, to be honest.
It does. Me and my mate were chatting about Lukaku, and I don't think he was a success at United. It obviously didn't work out. But one thing that you still quite like about him is if you chanted Romelu Lukaku's name and he heard you, you'd acknowledge it. Yeah. Which was for a striker was crazy, because you know what I mean. You've got thousands of fans singing your name constantly, but he'd give you he'd always sort of acknowledge it. And it's easy to hate on him because sometimes in interviews he comes across as a bit arrogant, a bit of a nana or whatever. But I do feel like we just shouldn't have signed him. Basically, the long story short, it was that summer that one where it was like Alvaro Morata or Lukaku, and Jose obviously preferred Lukaku, which I get because he had Premier League proven.
And he's a better player.
He's a better player. Funnily enough, we were linked with Morata the other day. Did you say that?
Yeah.
I was just like,
very nice.
Don't you think that all transfers seem to come around again? It's like, have we been linked with Paulo Dybala again yet?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. There's another one.
I think he's available for like 10 million.
What about Wesley Sneijder?
Not yet.
Well, keep your eye on that. I think we're going to wrap it up there, my brother, because we've spoke about what we need to spoke about. There's other things going on. There's the rumours that maybe Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to join Manchester United's coaching staff. There's talk of Eric tonight getting a new contract. Romano's mentioned that. Seems to be a bit sort of happening, not happened.
Yeah, we spoke about that in the Paddock podcast yesterday as well. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go and look there. You can get it's pretty much still the latest as it was then. Now. Okay, good stuff. We'll be back. I'll be back in the morning with the news, and then we'll be back. Me and him, we're back stood up behind that screen doing transfers live, how it should be, late at night in front of a screen with lots of questionable puns. That's been Joe Smith. Go and check him out on the Sloppy Joe's podcast. You know where to find me. This has been Transfers Live. Thanks for watching.